The whole tennis world held its breath the moment Roger Federer uttered 8 simple words: "She is the future of world tennis." It was a declaration that struck like lightning, sudden, forceful, and utterly undeniable. Yet the reason he made that statement is a story far more compelling than the headline it created. Suddenly, a 20-year-old from the Philippines, whose name was a mystery to most just 2 years prior, was being hailed by a legend as the heir to the sport. And if you think that's just empty praise, you need to hear the rest of the story. How does a player earn that kind of endorsement from an icon? The answer will redefine everything you think you know about Alexandra Eala. To grasp the full weight of Federer's words, you have to know Alexandra Eala's origins and the limits everyone tried to place on her. Let's be clear, the Philippines isn't a country famous for producing tennis champions. That isn't a slight, it's the harsh truth that every racket-wielding Filipino athlete has faced. For a long time in Southeast Asia, the sport was seen as a pursuit for the wealthy watched on TV from afar, a world of grand ambitions that most coaches would privately admit were fantasies. The country has given the world boxing legends and basketball stars, tough, determined fighters, but never a Grand Slam winner. The very idea was almost unheard of. Born on May 23, 2005 in Quezon City, Philippines, Alexandra Eala was raised a world away from tennis's traditional heartlands. She was the daughter of businessman Mike Eala and Riza, and with her family's backing, she also shouldered the hopes of a nation that rarely saw its flag on the sport's grandest platforms. But defying all expectations, she started forging a journey so remarkable that it would one day capture the attention of Roger Federer himself. Her mother, Riza Manuela, a former national swimmer and a long-serving CFO for one of the largest telecom companies in the Philippines, knew exactly what top-tier discipline and competition demanded. It was her grandfather on her mother's side, Bobby Mano, who first put a racket into her hands at the young age of 4. That simple act on an unassuming court back home would lay the groundwork for her entire future. A grandfather's faith in her, long before anyone else was paying attention, planted the seeds for an incredible journey. When she was only 13, Alexandra Eala made a choice that would change her life forever. She left for Spain to join the Rafael Nadal Academy, a world-renowned institution famous for forging some of the toughest players in the game today. The pressure of such a move must have been immense. She was just a teenager, an ocean away from everything she knew, trying to adapt to a different culture and language while facing the relentless pressure of an academy where greatness is the only standard. While she completed her training there in 2023, those crucial years were about more than just refining her strokes. She was developing an unbreakable mindset, the kind of mental fortitude required to walk onto center court and face the world's best without a hint of fear. Then in 2022, the tennis world got its first real glimpse that this young player was something special. A 17-year-old Eala made history at the U.S. Open Junior Championships by winning the girls' singles title, a first-ever Grand Slam junior victory for any player from the Philippines. Back in Manila, people were glued to their screens in stunned silence, with parents excitedly texting their kids the news. Across the nation, joyful tears were shed as the country finally had a tennis champion to celebrate in its modern era. But winning a junior Grand Slam is just the first step on a very long road. It's the introduction to the story, not the final chapter. The true test of turning potential into professional success had just started. Her initial years on the pro circuit were a tough reality check. She found herself mired in the 200s, suffering agonizing defeats in qualifying rounds and getting knocked out early in obscure ITF events that almost no one followed. This is the grueling phase that often crushes talented young players long before they get a shot at the big leagues. By 2024, Alexandra Eala's ranking topped out near world number 143, a solid achievement, but certainly not high enough to get legends like Roger Federer talking. Looking at the stats alone, you wouldn't have picked her as the next big thing in the sport. But rankings don't reveal everything, and they couldn't measure the foundation she was building. Her time at the Rafael Nadal Academy had instilled in her the tireless never-say-die attitude that defines Nadal himself. This drive wasn't just a lesson. It was ingrained in her very being. She continued to work day in and day out, far from the public eye. But in 2025, the entire narrative shifted. It was March at the Miami Open, a top-tier hardcourt event second only to the Grand Slams. The field was packed with the sport's biggest names. Everyone thought they knew how it would play out. Eala got in on a wild card, ranked around number 140, and most observers figured it was a move to draw in Filipino spectators, not to unleash a real contender. The expectation was for her to be a nice story, not a major force. And after she won her opening match, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. After all, wild cards win a round now and then. But then she faced Jelena Ostapenko, a former French Open champion, and pulled off a stunning upset. That victory made people sit up and take notice. Her next opponent was Madison Keys, the newly crowned Australian Open champion, and Eala beat her too. The buzz intensified. Commentators edged closer, and then the bombshell dropped. She defeated Iga Świątek, the world's #2, a 5-time Grand Slam winner and one of the most formidable players in the game in 2 straight sets. As a wildcard entry, Eala secured incredible back-to-back victories against the world #5 Keys and the #2 player within the same tournament. For a Filipino athlete in the history of the WTA, this was unheard of, and for any player outside the top 100, it was a truly exceptional accomplishment. The Miami crowd was simply not prepared for the spectacle unfolding before their eyes. Filipino supporters who had journeyed thousands of miles, some using funds they couldn't really afford, exploded into heartfelt celebrations that became an online sensation overnight. All across the United States and back in the Philippines, entire communities of overseas workers, students, and parents watched with a mix of awe and pride. What started as a wildcard opportunity had transformed into a major declaration to the entire tennis establishment. This wasn't a fairy tale moment, it was an arrival. Across America, Filipino workers gathered around their phones during breaks in office corridors and in their homes at the latest hours of the night to watch. A great number of them were weeping freely with no sense of shame. The ESPN line about her carrying the hopes of a nation onto the court had never seemed so true as it did during those electrifying Miami matches. Alexandra Eala's run finally concluded in the semifinals against Jessica Pegula, following an arduous 3-set fight that went on for over 2 hours. But at that point, the result on the scoreboard hardly mattered. The final score was almost an afterthought. The powerful statement she had already made to the world was what truly resonated. At only 19 years of age, an athlete from the Philippines had entered a premier tournament as a wildcard and had beaten 2 of her generation's most dominant figures consecutively. Following her breakthrough at the 2025 Miami Open, she became the first Filipino player to ever make a WTA 1000 semifinal and the first to crack the top 100 rankings. It was more than a personal victory, it was a moment of national triumph, and watching it all from a distance was Roger Federer. Although he'd been officially retired since 2022, he was never far from the sport, continuing his role as a global ambassador and mentor. He is someone who recognizes greatness because he defined it for 2 decades. After witnessing what Eala did in Miami, he didn't put out an official press release or stage a big reveal. He just shared 8 words that sent the internet into a frenzy. She is the future of world tennis. Coming from Federer, a short phrase like that carries the authority of a legendary career. It was the highest form of validation. The tennis world went wild. Social media platforms lit up. News headlines exploded. But the applause wasn't unanimous. Some retired players expressed doubts. Several analysts debated whether such high praise was premature. But perhaps the most telling reaction was from Eala herself, poised humble and completely unfazed by the commotion. The public's reaction was the most fervent since a 15-year-old Coco Gauff electrified the world at the Wimbledon Championships by taking down Venus Williams. But this felt different. It was more than a young prodigy toppling a legend. It was a nation rising behind her and a sports icon announcing the dawning of a new era. This wasn't merely a case of a young athlete getting a win over a legend. This was one of the most venerated people in the history of tennis, essentially passing the torch to a new generation. Roger Federer's pronouncement that Alexandra Eala was tennis's future carried an immense historical significance, and the fan response was a direct reflection of that. In one highly publicized poll, 79% of Talking Points fans chose Eala as their favorite over Coco Gauff, while 89% picked her over Emma Raducanu. Those poll results were simply astounding. They showed just how emotionally connected the global tennis fan base had become with the young Filipino star and how Federer's blessing had supercharged that support. But extraordinary praise always brings extraordinary pressure. The ensuing online discussion was immediate and at times incredibly intense. Her advocates pointed to the facts: her phenomenal performance at the Miami Open, her consistent climb in the rankings, and her record-breaking achievements. On February 9, 2026, she achieved a new career-high ranking as the world's number 40 in WTA singles, making her the highest-ranked Filipino player in history and the first from her country inside the top 40. She had already taken down multiple top 5 players, defeated major champions, and made it to a tour-level final in the Open era. By any objective measure, her rise was legitimate. However, critics had some valid reservations. A single amazing tournament performance isn't enough to build a career on. Discussions of all-time greatness demand Grand Slam championships, usually several of them, and consistent excellence over many years, not just months. A closer look at Eala's Grand Slam record up to that time revealed early round knockouts, first match losses, and struggles in qualifying rounds. The difference between one spectacular WTA 1000 showing and consistent Grand Slam success is enormous. That is in fact the very hurdle where so many promising careers have faltered. During the 2025 Italian Open, when asked about Eala's sudden fame, Coco Gauff's response was thoughtful instead of competitive. A reporter asked if the intense focus on Eala brought back memories of her own early experiences in the spotlight. Gauff's reply was poised and kind, observing that Eala seemed to be navigating the attention with a maturity and calm that is vital for anyone who has to bear the weight of a nation's hopes and the world's expectations. Coco Gauff observed that Alexandra Eala was managing the media frenzy with an incredible amount of poise for someone her age, because it came from a player who had personally faced that same degree of global pressure as a teenager. The compliment had genuine significance. Even so, the sheer speed of Eala's rise to fame appeared to take elements of the Women's Tennis Association by surprise. Huge numbers of fans were turning out for her matches, and she was becoming a sensation online. But her supporters were frequently frustrated by inconvenient match times and assignments to secondary courts, as if she were still a mid-level competitor instead of one of the sport's most rapidly ascending talents. In Dubai, during February of 2026, that story started to change. Organizers of the tournament at last awarded Alexandra Eala the coveted center court feature match, the last one scheduled for the day. It was the most sought-after spot on the schedule, and she made the most of it. In Dubai, she beat Jasmine Paolini, who was ranked in the top 10 and had reached 2 Grand Slam finals before also getting past Sarchersi. Her run took her to the quarterfinals, where she was ultimately defeated by Gauff, but by then her ranking had already climbed to a personal best of world number 32, a remarkable ascent in under a year. Every victory she secured quieted more of the discussion about whether Roger Federer's early praise had been premature. But through all the media buzz and online fame, a key question lingered. Just who is Alex Eala, and is she prepared for what lies ahead? The numbers on paper only reveal a fraction of the narrative. To see the complete picture, you have to look at the defeats, the trials that all legendary athletes have to face. One such chapter for Eala was written at the 2026 Australian Open. It marked her debut in the main draw of that Grand Slam, an event Filipino supporters had been waiting for with immense excitement, but it concluded in bitter disappointment. Despite winning the first set decisively with a score of 6-0, she was eliminated in the opening round by Alicia Parks, a player then ranked 99th in the world. Parks fought back with sheer force, hitting 12 aces and simply overpowering Eala with the speed of her shots. This contest brought a critical point to light. When facing players who serve with great power, regardless of whether they are top-ranked or lesser-known hard hitters, Eala's return game alone isn't enough to control the match. If she wants to reliably win matches against the best, her own serve needs more diversity and command, particularly during pivotal moments when an easy point can calm her down or clinch a set. This is the straightforward assessment of her game, and it's exactly this gap between flashes of genius and consistent execution that defines the difference between being a very good player and becoming a truly legendary one. What separates a top-tier competitor from an icon of the sport often hinges on the narrowest of edges, like having a serve that can deliver easy points in crucial situations. It's about maintaining the high level of a strong opening set for the entire match and having the strategic flexibility to adapt when your rivals have figured out your tendencies. This exact efficiency was on display in Dubai, when Alexandra Eala suffered a decisive loss to Coco Gauff in the quarterfinals. Following the match, Eala stated frankly, "There is absolutely still a difference in level between me and Coco." Her comment was notable not because it was a concession of her loss, but because it demonstrated an uncommon level of self-perception. At a time when athletes often present carefully crafted images online and give rehearsed interviews, for a 20-year-old to so candidly admit the disparity between her own game and a top player's showed a wisdom far exceeding her age. This type of clear-sightedness was a hallmark of Roger Federer's own career. It wasn't hubris, but a deep understanding of himself. It's the capacity to evaluate your performance objectively, to see the improvements that are needed, and to get back to work without making justifications. Commentators agree on her next steps for advancement. To move up in the rankings, Eala needs a more powerful serve for easier points, better adaptability to different court surfaces, and more strategic options during high-stakes situations. As is common for players with an aggressive baseline style, she sometimes struggles against defensive opponents who are skilled at returning shots, especially on clay courts where building a point with patience is key. These weaknesses are not insurmountable obstacles. They are simply the next stages in her development as a player. All the greats of the sport have been in this exact position. At 20, Serena Williams had areas to improve. At 20, so did Federer. The critical issue isn't the existence of flaws. It's about whether the player possesses the inner strength to overcome them. This is the context that gives so much weight to what Federer said. His statement that she represented the future of global tennis wasn't a claim that she was already a complete player. Instead, he was pointing out that she had the mix of skill, toughness, and ambition that has always been the hallmark of champions. Having spent 2 decades at the pinnacle of tennis, he knows that combination when he sees it. And he saw it in Eala. A more private moment, however, offered an even deeper insight into her character. In a simple press room following one of her career's most mentally taxing weeks, a reporter asked Eala about her thoughts on Federer. Her reply was both straightforward and revealing. She said she respected his elegance both during matches and in his personal life, his poise under pressure and his overall conduct throughout his long career. That isn't the response of a person focused only on winning titles. It's the perspective of someone who grasps that true greatness is defined by character just as much as it is by victories. She also shared another thought, one that demonstrated a maturity that seemed beyond her years. She mentioned that Federer's retirement served as a reminder that even the most legendary athletes are, at the end of the day, only human. They forge new paths and motivate entire generations, but ultimately they all leave the sport. This understanding is significant as it indicates she isn't swept up in the praise and attention. She seems to know that the opportunity for greatness doesn't last forever, and that each practice, every early start, and all the tough losses contribute to creating a meaningful legacy. Each time she competes in a Grand Slam main draw or pulls off a major upset, it reinforces the belief in the Philippines that their athletes can compete at the very top of the tennis world. This is a singular kind of pressure. Federer played for Switzerland, a country with a long-established history in tennis. In contrast, Eala is building that foundation for her nation practically from scratch. Her goal extends beyond simply winning championships. She is creating new possibilities which might just be the most demanding and impactful burden anyone could carry. As one Filipino worker in Abu Dhabi aptly put it, no athlete since the time of Pacquiao has managed to galvanize the entire country in the way that Alexa has. Being compared to Manny Pacquiao, who is arguably one of the most revered sports icons in the Philippines' history, speaks volumes about the stature Alexandra Eala has achieved at only 20 years old. And consider this, she hasn't even secured a Grand Slam championship yet. Let that fact really sink in. The sense of pride, happiness, and international recognition she has given to a country of over 100 million people has come even before she has won the sport's biggest award. So, what will unfold if and when she finally raises a major trophy? If the 8 words from Roger Federer could cause a stir in the tennis world, that particular moment would create an even bigger one. We've reached that point in her career where the discussion is no longer about rankings or successful tournament runs, but about something more profound. The foundation of a legacy is built on more than just the outcomes of matches. It's about the convergence of talent, bravery, sacrifice, and an unyielding confidence that you have a rightful place on platforms where your nation has seldom been represented. Federer's remark was more than just a compliment. It was a validation. It served as a confirmation that the belief held by millions of Filipino supporters for years is no longer just a domestic aspiration, but a worldwide phenomenon. The pertinent question at this juncture is not about whether she has already become the most outstanding Filipino tennis player in history. While many would say she is well on her way, the real question is whether she can move beyond that to be included in discussions about the most exceptional female athletes the sport has ever produced. Can she keep up this level of performance? Is there room for her serve to get better? Will her Grand Slam achievements live up to all the excitement? Or is the attention she's getting growing faster than her accomplishments? The tennis courts in 2026 and in the future will provide the final answers. However, for the time being, a player who is among the most celebrated in the sport's history has already shown his support. And for the present, that confidence is immensely significant.